Estelle Brink and I'm with Jericho Walls International Prayer Network. Today I want to speak about how to pray for your local congregation. Now I'm not going to go down the usual prayer list for like praying for the pastor, praying for the worship team. I want to touch on some other points that's very important to me. And number one, we are mostly praying for ourselves and our own survival. It's important to train our congregation members and our prayer group members to pray for the local church. One day the story was told of a man seated on an aeroplane next to another man that was seemingly very devoted, busy praying. And he could see that he was busy praying, and he asked him after a while, "I see that you are praying. What are you praying for?" And this was his answer. He was from a specific satanic church, and he was praying for the destruction of pastors' marriages and churches. So this is the effort that's going out against us. And that's why it's so important that we as members of our congregation and also members of our prayer group must pray for the church, according to the apostolic prayers on which we will touch also in other videos. So when we look at the things you can pray for your church, I want to touch on 5 points. Number one, share with the members of your church what is the specific calling of your church and repeat it often. When a new member comes into your congregation, they will know this is the focus of this church, and if I join here, this is what we are going to do, and the gifts that I have, these are the ones that would be needed to support the calling of God on this congregation. We cannot come with our gifts and then want to have our own ministry in the congregation that has a specific calling from the Lord. Then also, be sure that if there was a change in leadership, that you revisit what God said at the foundation of the specific church or congregation. And be very sure from the Holy Spirit that when you make a change or an alteration, it is from Him and not only from your desire to do something new or different. I have found that the core calling will remain the same, but the way in which we will do it for a new season can change. And then you lead your church members to pray in that regard and support the calling so we never deviate from the word of the Lord. Secondly, it's important to share with your members of your congregation the different projects in which the congregation is involved in. Share in such a way that it's possible for everyone to find a little place where they can bring whatever little or great thing they have. Some people have more ability to contribute to certain projects than others. Others can only give time, others can only give money. But be sure that you share all the possible ways in which a member of the congregation be part of the projects. And so important, especially that there are these projects. I remember the testimony of a man that told us about a congregation who was struggling financially, and they were literally a few months away from closing down completely. So he was brought in to sit down with the leadership and see what can be done to save the congregation from closing. And you know what was the very interesting thing? He said that this congregation cut back when they started struggling financially on their outreach projects. And they no longer had any outreach project nowhere. So he encouraged them to take a step in faith and start serving the poor and needy somewhere in their city. It wasn't long, I think it was within 6 months, that they would be able to cover their debts and they were recovering. This is a biblical principle for us to take care of the poor and needy, just as one example. What are the things God is telling you to pray for in your congregation? Support those ministries with prayer so they can prosper. Then the fourth thing, very important, is you must teach your congregation members how to establish a life of prayer. People, when they say, my private life or my prayer life is private, I don't share it with other people, I tell you honestly, I think it's because they actually do not know exactly how to have an established prayer life. And it's our responsibility to train and teach people to have an established prayer life and what it looks like and how you start with it, because you can't start with 6 hours a day. You start with 10 minutes and 15 minutes and you build it up. It's important to share these very basic things to all the generations in your congregation. Then lastly, I want to say that it's important that as leadership, you give specific guidelines on what to pray for the leadership of your church. You remember the story I told about the man that was seated on the aeroplane? These spiritual attacks are real, and we mustn't be naive about it. So make praying for the family life of your leadership, your whole leadership of your church, a priority on a constant basis, and as well as every marriage in your congregation, in your church, and the surrounding leadership of other churches in your area. Never, never be slack on praying for the safe family life of your congregation, because these are the foundational blocks that keeps people's faith together and not stumble away from God because a leader has fallen. So please implement these basic things in your congregation and hear from the Lord what He is saying to you.